Welcome back to the root. Keep those shoulders relaxed, keep your eyes moving, and let us dive into one of the most intellectually demanding sections of the Accuplacer. We are now mastering module ACC RD 3.1, analyzing multiple texts. On most of the test, you are dealing with one passage at a time. But in this module, the test makers are going to give you two separate passages, often labeled as Passage 1 and Passage 2. These passages will always be about the same topic, but they will approach it from different angles, with different tones, or with conflicting evidence. This is known as synthesis. The College Board wants to see if you can hold two different perspectives in your head at the same time and figure out how they talk to each other. To get a top-tier score on these questions, you have to move beyond just understanding what each author says. You have to understand the relationship between the two authors. Are they friends? Are they enemies? Or is one author simply providing the specific evidence for the general theory that the other author wrote? Let us start with the three most common relationships you will encounter between Passage 1 and Passage 2. The first relationship is direct disagreement. This is the most common. Passage 1 will argue for a specific point, and Passage 2 will argue against it. For example, Passage 1 might argue that remote work is the future of the economy because it increases productivity. Passage 2 might argue that remote work is a disaster because it destroys company culture and leads to employee burnout. The questions will ask you to identify exactly where these two authors would clash. The second relationship is general to specific. In this scenario, the authors don't actually disagree. Instead, Passage 1 gives you a broad, big picture overview of a topic, and Passage 2 focuses on one tiny, specific example of that same topic. For example, Passage 1 might talk about the general importance of biodiversity in the rainforest. Passage 2 might talk specifically about one type of rare frog in the Amazon. Passage 2 is zooming in on what Passage 1 is zooming out on. The third relationship is theory and application. Passage 1 might describe a scientific theory, like the psychology of how humans form habits. Passage 2 might describe a new smartphone app that was designed using that theory to help people stop smoking. Passage 2 is showing the real-world result of the ideas in Passage 1. Because these questions involve so much information, the test makers have developed some very clever traps. Let us break them down so you are ready for them. The first major trap is the one-sided answer trap. This is the most common way students lose points. The test will ask a question about both passages, but they will give you an answer choice that is only true for one of them. For example, the question might ask, which of the following is true about both authors? Answer choice A will be something that author 1 felt very strongly about, but author 2 never mentioned. You will remember reading it in the first passage, so you will want to click it. But if it isn't in both, it is a trap. You must be a strict gatekeeper. If an answer doesn't apply to both passages, it is wrong. The second trap is the false agreement trap. This is a subtle trick where the authors seem to agree on the broad topic, but they disagree on the details. Imagine both authors agree that climate change is a problem. That sounds like agreement, but if author 1 says the solution is more nuclear power, and author 2 says the solution is strictly solar and wind, they actually disagree on the most important part, the solution. The trap answer will say both authors agree on how to solve climate change. That is a lie. They agree that it is a problem, but they disagree on the fix. You have to look at the nuance, the small differences. The third trap is the attitude swap. The test will ask, what would author 1 most likely say about the evidence in Passage 2? The trap answer will give you author 2's own opinion. They are hoping you get the two authors mixed up in your head. When you are listening to these passages on the test, you must mentally tag them. Give them names if you have to. Call Passage 1 the optimist and Passage 2 the skeptic. This helps you keep their identities separate so you don't fall for the swap. Now, let us talk about your battle plan for when you see these multiple texts on the screen next Tuesday. Your first step is to change the order of how you read. Do not read both passages back to back and then try to answer the questions. That is a recipe for confusion. Instead, follow this 3-step process. Step 1, read the questions first to see what they are looking for. Step 2, read passage 1, then immediately look at the questions. Answer any questions that are only about passage 1. This gets them out of the way while the information is fresh. Step 3, read passage 2. Now, tackle the comparison questions. When you get to the comparison questions, you are going to use a technique I call the imagine the dialogue. Imagine the two authors are sitting across from each other at a dinner table. If author 1 says their main point, how would author 2 react? Would they nod their head and say, "Exactly, and here is more proof"? Or would they roll their eyes and say, "That's a nice theory, but it doesn't work in the real world"? If you can imagine the conversation between the two texts, the questions about how would author 1 respond to author 2 become much easier. Let us practice this with a specific example. Passage 1. The use of artificial intelligence in art is a wonderful advancement. It allows people without technical drawing skills to express their creativity and pushes the boundaries of what we consider art. Passage 2. Art is fundamentally a human expression of soul and experience. When a machine generates an image based on an algorithm, it lacks the struggle and the intention that makes art valuable. AI art is merely a high-tech imitation. The question might ask, on which of the following points would the authors most likely disagree? Choice A, the speed at which AI can generate images. Choice B, the definition of what makes art valuable. Choice C, the technical complexity of AI algorithms. The correct answer is B. Author 1 thinks the creativity and expression make it art. Author 2 thinks the human struggle and intention make it art. They are fundamentally fighting over the definition of value. The test might also ask a synthesis question like, which statement best describes the relationship between the two passages? Correct answer. Passage 1 celebrates the accessibility of a new technology, while passage 2 questions its authenticity. Notice how that answer covers both sides of the dinner table. It uses the word while to show the contrast. Another high-level tip for your audio learning: look for the pivot words in passage 2. Often, passage 2 is written specifically to respond to passage 1. Look for words like unlike the previous author, or while some argue, or a more nuanced view suggests. These words are like a neon sign telling you exactly how passage 2 feels about passage 1. Also, be prepared for common ground questions. The test might ask, what is one thing both authors would agree on? Even if they hate each other's ideas, they usually agree on some basic fact. In our AI art example, both authors would agree that AI technology has changed the way images are produced. They disagree on whether that is good, but they agree that it happened. To summarize this deep dive into Module ACC RD 3.1. First, identify the relationship. Are they fighting, zooming in, or applying a theory? Second, use the tagging system to keep the authors' identities separate. Third, beware of the one-sided trap. Don't pick an answer that only belongs to one passage. Fourth, use the imagine the dialogue technique to predict how the authors would talk to each other. And finally, read the questions first and attack the passages one at a time to keep your brain organized. Mastering multiple texts is the ultimate test of your reading flexibility. It shows that you aren't just a passive sponge for information, but an active judge of ideas. This is exactly what your professors at Hudson Valley Community College will expect from you in every research paper you write. Keep up the incredible stamina, mail carrier. You are almost through the reading section. You have built a massive amount of mental power today. That concludes our comprehensive breakdown of analyzing multiple texts. We have reached the final module of the reading section. Our next target is Module ACC RD 4.1, determining the meaning of words and phrases in context. Just say the word next, and we will finish the reading section strong.